Hi, I'm George Nordhaus, and welcome to Monday Morning. Now we're going to have a veteran on here with us today, Craig Andrews. He's done one of these before, and the reason that I like to do it, in addition to the fact he's a good deliverer and he prepares a good message, is the fact that he's an underwriter. You know, you just don't see many underwriters these days that are verbal and outgoing and communicating like Craig. So when I asked him to do this, he was happy to do it, and it really is great because he's with State Auto, and I worked with them for many years now. I asked him about underwriting, what kind of relationships. We were talking about agent relationships and all that, and I said, there's also an underwriting relationship, and he said, oh boy, is there. And so what we're going to do is talk about how to get your apps on the top of the pile and how important is that. Well, let me tell you about Craig now. He is there he is. He is the Business Insurance Product Development Officer. The multi-billion-dollar corporation. So it ain't easy, but it's a good one. He's been around a long time. He was an agent in, I think, in Northern Ohio, weren't you?
That's correct. That's correct.
Defiance or something, right? I remember
That's
that.
correct.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and he sold his agency eventually, and he came in with State Auto. Oh, State Auto, and he had look at the jobs that he has there with State Auto, a lot of them, and of course he's winning awards and he's been speaking, and he's a graduate of Indiana University, and I'm a Hoosier, so that really hits home to me very well, and a U.S. Navy veteran, and I'm a U.S. Navy veteran, so Craig and I understand each other, no question about it. Craig, I've always wondered as a person involved with agents dealing with companies, I always wondered what kind of relationship it is. And then I heard over the last number of years that the relationship between underwriters or the agents and underwriters is not like as close as it was, or it's not as intimate as it was because of there's so many. I guess there's a lot of reasons, the internet and everything else. What's the story?
Well, I think there's a lot to be said for that, George, and I think there's a lot of reasons for it. I think one primary driver is many companies are going to automated underwriting, especially for smaller accounts, and there are many policies going through underwriting systems without human intervention, and that's why, frankly, our discussion today, I've kind of targeted larger commercial accounts. And when I say larger, large, small, those are all relative terms. Most of my comments here today that I've prepared are directed toward the business is still submitted via applications, the commercial accounts of $20,000 or $25,000 on up.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say you got a couple of things. You got the automated underwriting, and frankly, I think our businesses, for a variety of reasons, have become, especially at the small end, has become much more of a commodity.
Yeah, but you still think that there's room for the underwriter to not be a commodity, and that's what we're going at today. Okay, let's talk about it.
Absolutely, that's to me that's kind of what can be one of the distinguishing characteristics of a producer. So, as you and I began talking about this topic, one of the things I mentioned was you can really find a whole lot written and spoken about how to sell effectively to prospects, policyholders, insureds, and so forth. But how much have we seen out there regarding how agents can more effectively sell their commercial accounts to underwriters?
I haven't seen anything on it for years, really. Maybe there is, but I just don't see it.
Well, and neither have I. And this concept of selling to the underwriter can sometimes be an overlooked skill set.
I can imagine.
Among producers. I've heard this referred to as the other sale, which I think is an interesting
I like
concept.
That. Right.
One experienced producer I know put it like this. He said, there's plenty of business out there. That's not my problem. I can find the prospects. At least 90% of the problem in commercial insurance production is getting an insurer to do what needs to be done to get the account.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so yeah.
I think that's a good thing, probably. well, it makes your point.
Yeah, right, absolutely. So in our session today here, focus is on exactly that challenge. We're going to discuss 6 principles here that I think will help you and your applications get optimum consideration and pricing from the commercial lines underwriters serving your agency. So let's get on with that, okay?
Oh, absolutely. I love it.
First principle, know your insurers. For example, does the account in question require in-house professional loss control services? If the risk does require loss control or perhaps sophisticated claim handling, or perhaps self-insured retentions or much higher deductibles, and the insurer doesn't offer these things, does it make sense to send your submission to that company?
Of course not.
Yeah, and these next 2 bullets I'm going to look at together here. Will the insurer likely be interested in writing the account once it has all it needs? And related to that, is the account within the insurer's appetite? So even if you as a producer take the time to develop all the necessary information, is there a possibility the company is going to want to offer a quote? In other words, does the company actually want this type of risk?
Yeah.
If not, the agent might be frustrating the underwriter as much as he or she is frustrating themselves. So, and then fourthly, can the underwriter deliver in time? Can they deliver a firm quote proposal within the time frame you have? Anybody that's produced commercial insurance knows they only have so much time between getting all the necessary info and getting back to your prospect with a quote. Does the company's track record suggest it can make your time frame? These are very basic things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and what happens is if folks butt their head up against a brick wall, nobody gets anywhere. And lastly, in this category of knowing your companies, is the underwriter going to be able to make a relatively independent decision? Can they make a decision themselves, or will there be multiple layers of authority that you have to deal with?
Let me ask a question. Excuse me for interrupting, but do you get a lot of submissions? I'm sure you can't give me a percentage, but what percentage or what you get a lot of that you just don't want to handle and you can't handle? You come right back to them and say, "Hey, I don't want that. This is not our appetite."
That's what the good underwriters do, and we do get those. I think all companies get them for a variety of reasons, George. The one reason is a company doesn't know their insurance companies they represent and is testing them out. Which is kind of my point with this whole. Know the companies you represent and their capabilities, what they want, and what they can't. One of the reasons agents are independent is different companies are good at different things.
I understand.
Yeah.
All right.
So the second principle, and this is dear to my heart, and that's, as you can see here, know your craft. Gain a current knowledge of loss exposures and the coverages that treat them, and keep it current. In other words, become an expert at matching available coverage to loss exposures. In other words, what we're talking about here is one of the things I've noticed through the years is the best producers have become a student of the industry. And what they've done, George, is they've availed themselves of the avenues available today for professional insurance education, both from the institutes with the Accredited Advisor and Insurance Program for Producers, or AAI, and the Associate in Risk Management, ARM, that helps agents understand insurance is just one technique for treating risk, especially on the larger accounts. Of course, CPCU has always been the standard, and And there's many ways to study and prepare for those exams today. And at the same time, we have the National Alliance out of Austin. We all know that they offer CIC and CRM. The major point here is to gain appropriate knowledge and to avoid letting that knowledge grow stale. This remaining curious about the factors that impact the property casualty business. We don't operate in a vacuum. And there's one of the great things about our business is so many things impact what we do, from customer expectations to changes in the law to changes in societal attitudes towards all kinds of things. And as part of all of this, the agent that subjects himself to a discipline of continuous professional development is one that stands out from others, frankly. And I'll be honest with you, underwriters, whatever the company, really appreciate working with knowledgeable producers. They'll generally give them the benefit of any doubt that might exist.
Do they say occasionally, do you hear them say, oh gosh, there's a guy from Agent Schmo up in Defiance, Ohio, whatever. And he just doesn't, I mean, they look at him and say, oh God, here's another one that's not very good. Or they look at him and say, boy, that guy is, I guess after a while you really know who's good and who's not.
There's no question about it. And what that gets to, and we'll be talking about this later, is this whole atmosphere of trust. Because just like in agents' positive relationships with their clients, fostering positive, healthy relationships with that other sale, as has been is mentioned, it's all a part of that same thing here. Absolutely right. So, next principle. This sounds really basic. Submit complete applications. Provide complete and accurate answers to all application questions. But you'd be surprised what a big deal that is for underwriters because of all the incomplete applications they get. So when they do get it, right? So when they do get a complete application, it's like I've seen some just shout for joy that they have a complete application. And kind of related to that is, sometimes applications include conflicting information. You'll find the total payroll on the GL application isn't consistent with the payroll shown in the workers' comp application or the number of drivers on the auto application. And that raises questions. It makes the underwriter wonder about the information in the applications when taken together. So, thirdly, I would say that you can demonstrate by your detail that you've researched your responses to the question. And, an application on which the detail is clearly current and well-researched shows consideration for the underwriter's personal needs and personal workload. Throughout all this, underwriters are people.
Yeah.
And they appreciate things like
Good point.
This. Avoid submitting apps that are just photocopies of last year's applications. Well, one of the things we get a lot, you'd be surprised, is an application that the company shown in the company blank in the application is somebody else.
God.
And it's come, and it's come into us, and when applications are clearly photocopies of last year's apps or somebody else's apps, or maybe a photocopy of last year's policy, it's really easy for underwriters to at least get the impression that the producer views that application more as a bothersome hurdle to overcome than as a good faith effort to paint a complete picture of the current status of the risk. I might add a couple of things here, George. A lot of agents write a lot of contractors, and one of the things your underwriter will really like is if you include a list of the projects the applicant has completed over the last 5 years.
Good.
In other words, what do they have out there? What have they done? What are their capabilities?
I like that.
And another idea is to look, everybody's got a website today. Voluntarily provide that prospect's website information.
Of course, it's so simple. Who would have thought?
Right. It just shows. I mean, it shows the underwriter how the prospect represents itself to the world.
Perfect.
You know, we've had underwriters tell me that Agent X says about the website, oh, they don't really do that stuff. They just have that out there on their website. And the underwriter's response has been, oh, you mean you want me to write a risk that lies on its website?
God, what next? What next?
Yeah, right. So, and you know, another little personal thing is call your underwriter and discuss the account with her or him after you've sent that in as an email or attachment or however you submit it. The bottom line here in this principle number 3, for an underwriter, a complete and accurate application demonstrates that the agent is helpfully thinking of the underwriter's needs. And I'll say again, underwriters are people too. That's kind of an underlying principle to a lot of this stuff here. Fourth principle.
Tell the truth.
Tell the truth.
What next?
Yeah. Now, you know, I know that sounds pretty basic, but abiding by the principle with the whole truth and nothing but the truth, always. You always win in the long haul by demonstrating you can be trusted. And you know, obviously withhold nothing. And, you know, here's the thing. There's no problem whatsoever, I don't think, in strongly emphasizing favorable characteristics of a risk. But the unfavorable, if there are any, must be exposed as well. The underwriter wants to hear that from you, not from some other source. And, you know, I can't emphasize this last bullet enough, George. There's no way to adequately express the competitive disadvantages faced by the producer who is not trusted by his or her underwriters.
I'll bet that's so true.
You know, many years ago, I worked in an agency with my old school insurance agent father. Now, I love my father. He gave me a lot of great advice. But early on in my insurance career, he gave me some bad advice. I remember at one point he wasn't too happy with me, and he said, Craig, always remember what an underwriter doesn't know doesn't hurt him.
Yeah.
Now that was very bad advice.
That was bad advice.
Yeah, right. So, you know, it sounds very basic and Boy Scoutish, but telling the truth is at all times. You know, it's kind of related to that old saw about it. It takes a lifetime to develop a great reputation, and one bad mistake to screw it all up. And it's the same way in these relationships. Fifth principle: include a risk narrative. Now, what I'm talking about here is those Accord applications that agents complete, and even company applications, ask for rating information only. They don't ask what your personal thoughts are about the risk. And what I'm talking about here is shock your underwriter by, along with the applications, you know, create a succinct, it doesn't need to be a book, a succinct document telling the underwriter how you feel about the risk, what you know about the risk. Things like the business experience of its key people. You know, the risk might have been founded 6 years ago. That might be on the application. But the principal and the chief operations manager may have over 30 years working in that same type of business. Tell your underwriter that. Give in the narrative a complete scope of the risks operation. Is there any particular demographic in which the insured specializes, or to which customers the prospect sells its goods and services? What's the nature of those customers' activities or operations? Where are the customers located? The customers of an insured business is a big factor in the overall risk profile that business has. Tell the underwriter what the account's reputation is within the community. I mean, what's their what exactly they do outside of work. What charitable organizations might the principals be involved in? A lot of times we get multiple named insureds on policies. What's their relationship with one another? It might be very simple. There might be a relationship where maybe there ought to be something special done from a coverage perspective. So you wouldn't know this necessarily, that is the relationship among the insureds, just from completing an application. And lastly, tell the underwriter your personal knowledge of the key decision makers. For example, if you're in a civic organization, a church, a synagogue, country club, or any other organization with the decision maker, or you know her or him from some other relationship, tell the underwriter that. That type of information gives the underwriter greater confidence in your knowledge of the risk, which inevitably is going to lead to multiple benefits for you.
Good.
You know, one other thing, George, you know, a lot of your agents, a lot of your customers have agency management systems. And many of those agency management systems have some very nice risk-specific questionnaires. They're specific to GL class or to type of operation or whatever. If you have access to one of those questionnaires that's related to the risk you're submitting, use it. Send it along with the application. Once again, it helps that underwriter, amidst all of these applications they get in the day, differentiate your application. Last principle here. This might seem old-fashioned to many people. Include photos. Picture's worth 1,000 words. And here's the thing. I remember a time in hard markets in the 80s and beyond where some insurance companies wouldn't take applications that didn't have a photo.
Yeah.
Well, you know, that is certainly a lot simpler to accomplish today, including a photo that is, than it was back then. We have seen some agents include even photos of autos, and if it's for example, a mobile equipment-driven risk, photos of a couple of the heavier pieces of equipment out on the lot. You can see how well maintained they are, and all of that. Photos demonstrate the submission's physical characteristics, its attributes. Also, tells the underwriter you've actually visited the risk, or somebody in your agency has. Yeah, your desire to freely share your knowledge. I mean, you're bearing all here. You're showing pride in your submission, and in the end, your good faith attitude towards your underwriters. This all gets back to, you know, I mentioned before, George, relationships. I mentioned the underwriter getting comfortable with the risk. The more comfortable they are, the easier it's going to be for them for you, the agent, to get the most advantageous conditioning and pricing for that account.
Let me ask you what happens on this picture situation. I send it all in. I got pictures. I go out to see them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now it's next year. Do I do the same thing again, or is it the underwriter keeps this? It's in my file, right?
Right. It's in the file. No, I think every year would probably be excessive. Actually, an underwriter would be highly thankful to get them once. You know, for one thing, in the account size that I'm talking about, especially the upper end, you know, you get up into the $100,000 premium range and beyond, you're likely going to be doing a risk control inspection sometime after policy issuance. And so in that process, undoubtedly, the risk control specialist will be taking some photos. So I'm mainly talking here about that initial dance, that initial courtship, if you will, on the account. That I think is the most is what my comments here are targeted to.
Right.
So we get to the bottom line, and before I go there, I have a final thought here also. Nothing succeeds like success, as we all know, and that's true even with underwriters. So it also helps a lot to develop a positive hit ratio with your underwriters. Now, contrary to what a lot of agents might think from time to time, your underwriter wants to write good business too. She or he will develop very warm thoughts toward an agent and that agent's submissions when the agent lands a healthy percentage of the business the underwriter quotes for the agent. In other words, fewer things other than incomplete applications can be frustrating for an underwriter as providing what they see to be competitive quote after competitive quote after competitive quote and never writing any business. After a while, the kind of spirit of cooperation and warmth can evaporate.
Right.
So here's the thing. It's my contention. Now, this is just one guy that's been banging around this business for 38 years, but it's my contention, having seen both sides of the business, that when you develop and maintain credibility with your underwriters, your apps will get to the top of the pile, and you'll get the best possible pricing.
And it really works that way, huh?
It really does. You hear in underwriting management meetings time after time, well, yeah, I know this risk might be on the edge of our risk appetite, but I really trust this agent.
Over those years, I have seen this thing come and go in many, many ways, back even when I was in Indiana and Tennessee running the associations back there on a day-to-day basis. And the underwriter, it seems to me, well, I guess the whole industry, obviously, but the underwriters caught hell from everybody. God,
right.
Do you remember?
Right.
It wasn't something you would brag about. I'm an underwriter for State Auto.
Yeah.
What's happened? I think it's gotten different. I think it's outgrown all that, I hope.
I think it has, George, and related to that, I can tell you that shortly after I began to work here, I was actually working with underwriters that had handled my agency, and as I've mentioned before, my father was a bit of an old school agent, and it was his strategy to just browbeat underwriters to death. Force them to take risks. And I remember one of my underwriting colleagues, when he found out I was Doe Andrews' son, he could not believe it because my father beat him up so bad, and now here I am, his son, working for the company.
You've gone a long way, baby. Well, this has really been good. I've really enjoyed this because I think we need to bring these kinds of things up, but we just haven't done it over the years. And I'm glad when I ask you, what do you think of this? You jumped on it, and that's really good, Craig. I think you said it all. I hope now that our people will, who are listening to it, will take this. This should be heard by everybody submitting any kind of commercial lines application in the agency. I think wouldn't hurt them, would it?
No, it all gets back, to that relationship thing. Every good producer knows the value of their relationship with their clients. The value with the underwriter is to be honored and cherished and protected in the same way.
I totally agree. Well, if you'd like to talk to Craig, he's always been very helpful, and he'll answer any questions that you might have, even if you don't represent State Auto. I hope I'm not putting you on the spot there, Craig.
No, that's no problem.
I know it isn't a problem because that's the way you are, and I appreciate that very much. Appreciate what you've done. So, folks, I'm glad you got to hear it. I'm glad you actually heard from an underwriter who's been there and done that and still does it and runs other underwriters for billions of dollars worth of business. Holy mackerel. So I look forward to seeing the rest of you next Monday morning. And again, call Craig anytime you want to. And Craig, I want to thank you again. You always make a hit with me.
Well,
Okay?
you're welcome, George.
Happy
Pleasure.
to do that. Okay.